Hello there, Flip here, and today we're going to be looking into Dahlia and Skirk, in which, yeah, all the worst nightmares about how restrictive she would be are true. Dahlia, I don't even know. I've run a couple of her numbers across different teams, and let's just talk about it. But before we do that, as always, if at any points during the video you're entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk on various topics regarding Genshin's meta and I'll try to keep you updated. Shout out to all my glorious channel members, you mean the world to me, and your support is appreciated. And with that out of the way, let's begin. So as expected, Skirk is going to be an on-field normal attack based sword DPS asterisk. It seems that she can actually have two different playstyles depending on how you want to use her. Though her normal attack playstyle is just a better way to use her currently. For her elemental skill, she has both a tap and hold variant. The tap version of her skill will make her enter a special stance and give Skirk 45 stacks of Serpent Subtlety. They'll just call it Serpent stacks for now. And in Skirk's special state, which can only be activated through her tap skill, Skirk will gradually consume her Serpent stacks, which if she goes to 0 will just enter skill state. The AoE of Skirk's normal and charge attacks will also increase, and they'll be converted to cryo as well. Skirk will also be able to use a special elemental burst, which we'll get to later, and she can also walk on water. I don't really know what to do with that information, but she can. Now for the hold variant of her skill, it still gives her 45 Serpent stacks, but instead of making her do a stance change, she enters a high mobility mode temporarily and will just float around. Don't worry, this will make more sense when explaining her elemental burst, which, speaking of, she has two different ones, trying to be Varessa so bad. Skirk's elemental burst regardless doesn't use energy, but one of her elemental bursts will consume Serpent stacks, which is her default elemental burst, and her special elemental burst can only be triggered in her stance change. For Skirk's default burst, you need at the minimum 50 Serpent stacks to use it, and each stack above 50 gives you stronger burst damage like Malfika's, up to 12 additional stacks. The maximum amount you can hold at C0 is 100, but you won't really go that high. Anyways, to spoil how her split playstyle work into her gameplay, both the tap and hold skill give 45 Serpent stacks, and if you want to use her default elemental burst, then you have to do the hold variant of her skill to get 45 stacks, and the rest you'll get through her passives. In regards to how strong this burst is, it front loads like 400k damage with buffs, but this obviously isn't enough to be the bulk of your DPS, so you're only really using it to finish off a wave of enemies or something. The burst you're most likely going to use though is the one enabled through her tap skill, which deals no damage, meaning the gallery set doesn't grief your normal attacks, but instead it applies a single target buff to 10 of your normal attacks. She does a total of 15 hits from the gameplay we've seen, so that's 2/3 of her damage being buffed by this. The buffing her elemental burst does to her normals is also increased if the burst consumes a Void Rift, which, let's explain what that is by going into her passives. Her first passive states that when nearby teammates trigger Freeze, Superconduct, Cryoswirl, or Cryocrystallize against enemies, a Void Rift is going to be created. 3 of these can exist on field at the same time, and they can be consumed by using her special elemental burst, using a charge attack while in her special stance, or using her hold skill. When consumed, these Void Rifts will give 8 Serpent stacks to make her skill duration longer, or for her burst to do more damage, as well as making the buff from her burst stronger as well. You know what, I think it's really interesting how they allow you to use multiple different cryo reactions to enable this. So surely you can play her in multiple different teams and you aren't locked to a specific archetype. Right. Whenever Cryo or Hydra party members deal damage of their element, you get an insanely strong multiplier that can only effectively be triggered if your team is full Cryo or Hydra basically. This is such a massive jump from 2 to 3 that I don't even think there's a justifiable team slot that would be able to compensate for even just using Copium, Cryo, or Hydra teammates. The only character I can think of is Bennett, but that still might grief your uptime as Melt doesn't give you a Void Rift. For Nouvelette, the reason why you could just ignore his last Draconic stack is that for one, you could actually just get it in combat depending on the enemy, but also Furina is such a big upgrade to Nouvelette as she does tons of damage herself in Nouve teams, reduces his energy requirements, making his rotations much smoother to play, is capable of supporting Nouvelette's really long rotations, and also there were so few characters, especially at the time of his release, that could actually support Nouvelette fully anyways, due to the fact that he's a HP scaler that uses charge attacks, both of which don't have dedicated buffers. So for all of those reasons, Furina still ended up being the perfect partner for Nouvelette in spite of losing a Draconic stack. This is also a very similar thing with Linny, where he benefits a lot from having multiple Pyro teammates, with the enemy being affected by Pyro. However, the Pyro roster for supporting besides Bennett is so limited that you're just better off escaping the mono Pyro hole. Furina was right there, who could enable Linny to vape everything whilst buffing him and adding in her own personal damage. So for Linny, it wasn't a real restriction for him either. But in Skirk's case, this character exists, and so does this character. So unlike Linny and Nouvelette that just had bad teammate options, which made leaving their passives easier, not only is Skirk's passive just a stronger multiplier, fire, but her teammates in her passive restraints would have been the best picks for her anyways, especially a character like Escoffier. And I'll just flash on screen my calculations for Skirk with and without Escoffier, and yes, it looks horrible. I can't even imagine taking her outside of freeze. But when we get more information on her ICDs, I'll try to. So if you're planning to get Skirk, you really want to look into also getting an Escoffier, though don't make your decisions just yet. It's version 1 and things might change. But yeah, just brace yourself, I guess. I don't know where else I'm going to put it, but if you want to compare Skirk to Ayaka, they are about the same theoretically. Though as always, if you want, take Ayaka's numbers with a massive grain of salt, because Skirk's damage is going to be a lot more consistent, whereas if you suck at playing Ayaka, you can indeed miss her burst. Also, this is assuming a frozen enemy with Blizzard Stray on Ayaka, so yeah. In terms of team options, you of course have her with the Escoffier and Furina, and you can either play double Hydra or double Cryo teams. For double Cryo, which should just be her best team, your best bet will be Shenhe, although Rosaria and Sitlali will be good alternatives. Sitlali giving the scroll set and resistance shredding, while Rosaria gives extra crit rate and does pretty good personal damage. And then for double Hydra teams, Yulan will be your best bet, although again, Jingcho, Mona, and Candice could be pretty fine replacements. And if you're curious about Dahlia, they just don't do enough to justify a placement with Skirk. The GOAT Vomfi made a much bigger comparison sheet, comparing Skirk in a lot of different scenarios, so if you're curious, you can just look on screen right now. Pretty much all of the Escoffier teams are relative to each other, while as we've shown before, the non-Escoffier teams have a noticeable gap. 60 to 70k DPS in the current meta is crazy. If you don't have Escoffier, you're just using Charlotte or Mika in her place, and then either of the Cryo or Hydro Flex slots I just mentioned. Oh yeah, by the way, she also gives the team +1 to elemental skills if the team is made up of only Hydro or Cryo units. So to conclude, the way you're going to want to play Skirk is on a full freeze team. You want to set up your teammates, which will generate rifts. Then once you switch into Skirk, use her tap skill, her burst, and then just normal attack spam. If you have a Escoffier, Skirk is just going to be one of the best DPS in the game with a very brain-dead playstyle. But if you don't have a Escoffier, Let's move on to talk about Dahlia now. Don't worry, there's not that much to talk about. So adding to the femboy roster, Dahlia is going to be a Hydra Sword 4-star, and he is sadly, spoiler warning, cover your ears, kind of bad. His elemental skill also has both a tap and hold variant in which he just prays, which summons a mist ball or so, I don't know how to explain it. He spawns Hydra on the ground, which on contact with enemies will explode, though if a party member is on top of it, then they get launched upwards, which enables a plunge attack. I don't know. This is all the skill does, by the way. It doesn't do that much damage either, so you either just get a really bad nuke or you're able to lift yourself up for a plunging attack, which moving on. For Dahlia's elemental burst, he creates a Hydra shield, and it is able to be refreshed if you do normal attacks. So he's like Hydra Toma, except it doesn't seem like he has any off-field Hydra application, which is obviously bad. Part of the reason Toma is good is because he applies Pyro. Dahlia's shield is really weak individually, but it's supposed to be refreshed, so that's kind of the gimmick. For passive talents, he gives 15% attack speed, which is worse than a C0 Mika, and the other restores energy if you trigger freeze. His constellations are on screen, they don't do anything, don't worry, except for a C6, which gives Dahlia a total of 25% attack speed. So TLDR, he gives a Hydra shield and buffs attack speed by 25% at C6. That's about it. So what teams can you use Dahlia in? I cannot tell you. I don't know who this character is for. Attack speed is already not a good stat on melee characters unless you have a lot of it due to hit lag. So ideally you'd want to pair this with a ranged character, in which I can only think of Wanderer and Yoimiya benefiting from this. But it's not really going to be either of their best teams, as they have access to much stronger buffers. And if you just want a good general shielder, then look at Lanyan, who enables Viridescent and TTDS. Even for Skirk, Dahlia doesn't do a lot for her compared to the other Hydra or Cryo units you could be using in his place. Assuming you have no hit lag, you're getting at most like, what, 4 more normal attacks? Compared to Candice, who can give a 40% normal attack damage bonus. I don't know, he just doesn't seem worth it to me. So yeah, Dahlia and Skirk don't really have that much synergy together. You're better off using Rosaria or Candice for cope Skirk options. And Dahlia is looking to be another 4-star with a very forgettable kit. Could never be my GOAT official. But with that, both of the characters in 5.7 are very disappointing to me. Dahlia just isn't a good character unless we're missing something from his kit. And Skirk, despite the fact that she's very strong, her kit is very boring to me and doesn't offer much creativity, as well as her teammate situation without Escoffier being extremely dire to the point it's ridiculous, especially for a character with a 1-patch gap. But with that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Dahlia and Skirk, as I'd love to hear and respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, once again, the continued support means the world to me. I'll make sure to have all the member requests out soon, I promise. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.